it's Pastor Sharo here, and welcome to another episode of the Preacher Girl podcast. Today is going to be such an exciting day. One of my favorite people in the whole world is a guest on our PG podcast today. I guarantee you're going to love it. Wherever you are in this world, you are in for a treat. So how's your day been? I hope it's been terrific. We have somebody who is probably on the other side of the world from you. Today we're so honored and privileged. I'm so humbled to have, not in the studio, but all the way in Mozambique, Africa, Missionary Celia. Say hi, Sally.
Hey, PG girls.
So yes, Miss Celia, missionary, pastor, ordained minister, Celia is in Africa tonight as we speak. It's just afternoon here in New York, but it's nighttime for her. So thank you for being here when it's so late and for staying up and looking so fresh and putting makeup on, which is something I know she doesn't do on a regular basis. She's wearing makeup just for you. Yes, that's how important you are. So, Sally, the way this works is that right now they can see both of us at the same time. So you can wave.
Hey.
Right. So I'm going to ask Sally questions. While she's speaking to you, you'll probably just see her face. And this is the first time we've used this software to do a remote interview. So let's jump right into it because I know that you're excited to hear from her, as am I. So Sally, before we tell them how we met, which is such an important and exciting story, will you tell our preacher girls when you knew you were called into full-time ministry?
Well, when when I was the age of 12 years old, I had a dream. And on this dream, I died, and I went to heaven. And in heaven, I wanted to meet God. I went and said, I want to see God because I died, but I don't want to be dead. And I finally got through different stages, and I met God. I said, God, I died, but I don't want to be dead. And then God told me, you are going to be born again. Now, I had never, ever opened the Bible. I didn't know how to read the Bible. I didn't know how to open the Bible. I never, ever heard the story of Nicodemus or anything. So nothing influenced me on that dream. He said, you are going to be born again. On 2 days later, that was from Friday to Saturday. On that Saturday, some friends of mine invited me to go to church. So I went to church on that Sunday and I received Jesus. Ever since the moment I received Jesus, I had that deep feel. I didn't know what was to be a missionary. I didn't know what was to be a pastor. I just knew in my heart that I was not to be in those four walls of the church. For me, those four walls were a little bit claustrophobic. I wanted to be outside. So I preached on the buses. I always had tracts on me. I always shared about Jesus. If I was with friends, I would say, can we not pray? Why are we not praying? So ever since I received Jesus, I had that deep feeling in my heart. I didn't know how to name it. I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that I was not supposed to be in the falls of the church. I was supposed to be outside. So I went to the slums of Brazil and I shared Jesus. I preached. I cast out demons. Whatever came on our way, that's what I was doing. That 12, 13, 14, that was my training,
Wow.
Even at that early age.
Well,
Yeah.
It's so funny that you say that the walls of the church really made you feel claustrophobic. I think it's just so fitting because of all the places in the world to meet you, I met you in the Amazon, in the forest, on a river, in a boat. Yeah, that's how Pastor Sally and I met last year, going down the Amazon in a boat. And our first encounter together, really, the Lord took two preacher girls, couldn't be more different from two opposite places on the planet, very different lifestyles. Let me tell you something. Guys, I keep saying this over and over. It is so crazy how God makes these woven meetings and appointments. And She's from Brazil, living in Africa. I'm from Trinidad, living in America, and we meet going down the Amazon.
No walls.
No walls. Yeah, she is all about the no walls, and that's how God put us together. So I want to ask her to just give you some insights, and I know so many of you are in that place right now. We have so many young PGs in our community that you don't even know what you're called to do. You feel maybe a call to missions work, but you don't know where to begin. Sally, you said you knew from the time you were 12 that you were called to be outside of the four walls, but how did you even get involved in missions work?
Well, just repeating that, I didn't know what the word missionary meant.
Right.
I didn't know how to be a missionary. Um, but I had that deep feel in my heart, so I pursued it. But even before that, I went to a camp, a youth camp, and on that youth camp, um, no one touched me. No one, God didn't use anybody to speak those thunder prophetic words over me. But on the floor, crying, God Himself spoke, and He said, I am going to take you to Bethel. Not Bethel in California in America, but Bethel, the Bible college I went to.
Oh,
And He said, I'm going to take you to Bethel. And then when He said that, and this detail of in my experience may bless some of you, because at that moment I said, I cried a deep, it was a loud scream, but it was a deep at the same time. I said, what about my family? And I felt like what we call, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but like I felt like He was cutting the umbilical cord, like the emotional umbilical cord. And I was like, what about my family? And then I felt something was like tearing inside of me. It was the first, the only, and the last time I cried about leaving my family.
wow.
Then I was at the age of 16. After that, I pursued that. I went to see like this Bethel Bible College thing. So I applied for it. I had no money to go to Bible college. My family was very poor, didn't have money to pay for me to go to Bible college. I applied, I got accepted, and then I gave a step of faith. And I said, well, Lord, if you called me, you are the one that told me that you're going to do this. I didn't pick the college. You told me you were going to take me there. So do it. And so through a series of events, He provided from the start to the end, 4 years in that Bible college.
Wow.
So that's how but it has been a step of faith all along. And so that's how I got in there. That's how I got involved. When I finished after 4 years in that Bible college, I went straight, like I was ordained as a pastor for the Church of God in Brazil. Then I went to Bolivia. I did some mission work there. Then I did another missions training course. And at the age of 26, I left Brazil 16 years ago. Oops,
Wow.
I just, if you're good at math, you know my age. So I am in Mozambique. I came at the age of 26, and I have been here ever since.
Wow. The leaving Brazil, you left alone. You left all by yourself. How brave do you have to be to do something? Weren't you scared?
Um, no.
Were you excited?
So the reason I'm hesitant to answer this is because I know that most people would be scared, but that was not my case. I had been to come to Mozambique. I have been preparing for 6 years.
Wow.
6 years. So 4 years in Bible college. The time I took to have my credential and my missions training and going to Bolivia. So after 6 years to come to, and I had gone by myself to Bolivia with a suitcase and a guitar. I used to play, not anymore. And like driving and not driving, going on what they call the train of death. And so after you've done all that, to come to Africa is like what we call in Brazil, it's a small coffee. I don't know if it
Oh.
makes sense to you. It's a small coffee. So when I came, I was so excited. I was not scared. The one thing that frightened me a little was malaria. But then after 1 month I was here, I had my first of 12 malarias. And so I was like, oh, okay,
Wow.
okay. So no problem.
My first of 12 malarias.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. But so were there ever times that you were lonely? And if you were, how do you deal with that? Because guys, I know there are guys in the PG community. Pastor Celia's, she's single but not available. Just letting you know. But how do you deal with the loneliness in the ministry? Because I'm married and I still feel that sometimes. How do you do that?
Well, for the first 13, I've been here for 16 years. For the first 13 years of my time here, um, I I went through phases where I did feel lonely, where I did wish I had a husband. Um I sometimes I wished to have a husband, sometimes I didn't wish to have a husband. Sometimes I thought, what will I want a man for? Just to change my tire, because everything else I can do. Oops. But then there were times I was like, oh, I would like to have somebody to give me a hug or things like that. So how did I deal with it? The feet of Jesus. Going to the feet of Jesus. So I want to tell you, preacher girls, that we are not, what I say, like superheroes, Wonder Women. We are all human beings, and we go through all these feelings and everything. But we need to have our anchor, and always run into the feet of Jesus. And by doing that, what I call those 13 years, the desert years of my life, and I went through all the ups and downs and all the phases, and going through that, you learn to develop such a deep intimacy with Jesus. I had visitations of Jesus in my room where I saw him, and I was kneeling down and just in awe. So my experiences in everything that I've ever experienced, in my emotions, in my loneliness, in my feelings, and sometimes even frustrations or depression, not like deep depression, but feelings of depression that sometimes come over us. Whenever we experience the presence of Jesus at certain level, even if we are low down here, he takes us up here, and it's the most wonderful. It's more than a feeling, because feeling is very emotional. It's supernatural. It's almost as if he takes us from our level and then brings us a little bit into the level he's at. And when we get here, I can't, I'm not sure if I can describe in words. None of these has weight anymore. It's almost as if he takes us up here and let us see ourselves from his level. And so that comforts so much that it gives, just like Elijah ate that food and then carried on going. It feels like that. It feels like when he gives, in my experience, when he let me experience that, every time, it was not just one time, every time it felt like he gave me strength to carry on, and then look back and like, oh, but that's so small compared to these. So that's how I've been dealing with these.
So, Missionary Celia, you said that the first 13 years, you sometimes felt like you were in a wilderness. But describe these last 3 years that you've been in ministry. What has that felt like to you?
To me, the past 3 years of my life, because as I mentioned, like, to me, ministry really has begun when I received Jesus,
Oh,
straight into buses and sharing Jesus and going to the slums. So, but the past 3 years of my life, to me, I consider they are the most fruitful years of my life in terms of ministry and emotional growth, spiritual growth, walk in my walk with the Lord. The past 3 years, it feels like as if it's where my ministry has began.
Wow, that's amazing. But something must have happened to get you to that place. What was your shift? What caused you to change in your mindset or to change in your situation or the way you were doing ministry or viewing ministry? Tell us about what happened in your life.
Well, in 2013, I went through the most difficult experience that has ever happened to me. Um, I had been in Mozambique since 2003, and I have done many things from discipling over 100 young men to preaching, sharing the gospel. I have set foot in every single um, state of this country but one, sharing and then driving through bushes and going into communities and doing these massive outreaches. And so in 2013, when we were coming back from one of these outreaches, and this was one of the most amazing ones. We had many people saved. We had many people giving, like being healed. And so it was like a full on, we had 5 cars, 23 people. It was amazing. On our way back, Sunday afternoon, 27th of July, 2013, I wasn't speeding or anything. We were driving into a village, and I hear a sound on the side of the car, on the side of the car, and I stopped the car. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if something hit the car. And when I stopped, I saw a boy laying on the side of the road. So he hit the car on the side, and he fell backwards on the pavement, and then he died instantaneously. I didn't know he died right there and then. So we picked him up. I know we don't do that in Brazil. We probably don't do that in America, but we picked him up, put him in the car, and ran to the hospital. Got there, and I was numb. I wasn't feeling anything. I was in my drive mode. I was like, let's get this done. So, but my world fell apart when they put the cover on his head. To me, because we were praying, Lord, don't let that boy die. Don't let that boy die. But when we got into the hospital and then they put the cover on his head, then we knew. I knew. And so the police came and said, who is the driver? Driving license. And they got my driving license. They got the car document and said, come with me. So they took me to the police station. I was under police custody for 24 hours. They they tried to put me in a cell with 40 men. And I probably don't know how to describe in words how I felt. I felt like a sheep, a lamb going into a cave of wolves. But the pastors intervened and said, no, you can't let her go in there with 40 men. You can't let. And so then the police agreed to let us sleep in the car, but they took the keys and they took my driving license. And so we spent the night in the car that night. And the next day, at 4 p.m., 24 hours later, they released me. And a month later, I was back at that village to go through a trial. So during that time, I was numb. I was just like trying to get over it, trying to get through it. But afterwards, it hit me. So one of the things I want you to know, preacher girls, is that you may see Pastor Cheryl, you may see me, you may see the people that you admire, but you don't know what they went through, and you may not know their journey. And I do not want to discourage you. The other way around, I want to encourage you. Our call comes with challenges. And sometimes what I've learned through this experience is that every time God wants to take us to another level, He has to deal with us in the level we are at and even in deeper levels, so that when He builds on where we are, it's not going to crack. So going through that experience, I would say in a very angry way that no one would ever convince me, not even God Himself would ever convince me that this was for a reason. Because in my heart, it was like I was doing His will, I was preaching His word, I was praying to him for his people. I was going after the lost. I was not doing anything for myself, and he had this happen. So I was so angry. But I want you to know, we can still do ministry professionally. That's something I learned. We can still pray for people. I was still a pastor. I did not stop being a pastor. I was still a pastor, and I was still the Missionary Celia in Mozambique. On the outside, nothing had changed, but on the inside, I was dying because I was so upset. I was so frustrated in how he had let that happen. And I would say this to not to everybody, not to anyone, because I wouldn't talk about this for 3 years. I didn't talk about that much, but to the people close to me, I would say no one would ever convince me that he had a reason for this. There is no way he would have a reason in this. 3 years later, he changed. He changed my way of thinking. He changed because he showed me that he wanted to take me to a different level. And he exposed something very deep that was inside of me. When I was a young girl, my father came home drunk, and he was beating up my mother. And I had grown up. I had studied in a Catholic school, and I went to a Catholic church. And as my father came home drunk, and then he beat up my mother, I prayed to Mary for her to make my father stop. And the more I prayed, Mary, help my mother, Mary, stop my father. The more I prayed to her, the more my father beat my mother. Never thought about that anymore. I must have been 8 years old, and I never thought about that. But when I was going through that, the feeling, because I never consciously dealt with what I felt on that night. But I was going through a ministry. Somebody was ministering to my life because of everything that I was going through. And God exposed a crack in my my belief foundation. And I felt the same way. I had been abandoned. And how could I trust God if he doesn't answer? Because to go on that outreach, we prayed, we fasted, and yet he let it happen. And so what God exposed was that I had this crack in my belief system, in the foundation of my belief, and he exposed it. And he basically told me that what I want to do with you in the area I want to use you, I need to expose this crack, and I need to fix this crack so that I can build on it. Because what I have in your life later on will need a strong belief foundation, faith. And I needed that. I didn't know I had that crack. And so 3 years later, I want to tell you, preacher girls, that the same person that said no one would ever convince me that God had a purpose on this, I can tell you, well, now it's 6 years from that experience, but 3 years later, I said, God, thank you. Because had that not happened, I would not have known that I had such a deep crack in my foundation. Because even in that time of frustration, I would say, God, I don't want to be upgraded in ministry. I don't want to be known. I just want to be hidden. I just want to be where I am, and then doing what you want me to do. Why do you even bother calling me to a greater thing? Who even said that I want a greater thing? Because for me, it was like so painful. But once you say yes to the Lord, he takes your yes, and he will do anything to take you to the place where his plans are for you. And so that's what he did with me and in my life. He exposed what was under me so that he could deal with it. He could heal it to take me to a higher ground.
Wow. Wow. I after something like that, Preacher Girls, that's full disclosure. You won't find that kind of candid, raw confession. I mean, preachers want you to feel like we're superheroes. We want you to feel like if we've got it all together. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes God puts us through things and we are like, why? Why? No, no, we never asked for this. We didn't ask for a promotion. We'd rather just be okay and not hurt than be promoted. But when you allow God, like Pastor Celia said, when you allow God to just have you, when you say things like, I surrender, then He starts to do a thing that you can
Mhm.
only see in hindsight. And you can only look back and say, if it had not been for God, and look at where I am now. So that's what I'm praying for you, Preacher Girl, that whatever you're going through, even if you can't see the hand of God right now, I'm praying that He somehow when you come through in the end of it that you see that it was just as He said, working together for your good, because His plans outweigh your plans. They're better for you. Pastor Celia, you said something, you hinted at something that I've heard you say over and over and over, and that was you were telling God, I don't want to be known on the earth. You guys wouldn't know this about her, but I must tell you, in Mozambique, to get where she is in Gambani, you got to go to nowhere and then go to the back of nowhere, and then you'll find her. And she's asking me, we're driving down like 15 minutes of dirt road surrounded by trees. And she's like, do you know your way yet? And I'm like, are you kidding? How does anybody learn the way? Like this tree, that tree? That's where she is, in the back of nowhere with a bunch of kids and some people who come and worship faithfully at their church. But then when she goes to Brazil, everybody knows her. She is Missionary Celia. She is everybody knows that she was the first in her denomination to be sent abroad, and she was a female, and she is loaded with preaching appointments, 3 months of constant preaching 4 and 5 times a week. That's how famous she is. Everybody knows her in the church circles. But she leaves that to go to the middle of nowhere. And she said to me often, she said, I don't care to be known here on the earth. Sally, you tell them the way you tell me.
Well, in 2009, I had this visitation where Jesus took me by the hand and took and walked me into this field that I thought were flowers. And I was like, wow, because I saw flowers as far as my eyes could reach. And then Jesus took me by the hand and flew with me over those flowers. And when I looked down, they were not flowers. They were faces, people's faces. And I said, wow, Jesus, they're not flowers, they're people. I said, who are these people? And Jesus said, these people are people that have gone through the valley of suffering. They're not known on the earth, but they are highly known in heaven. And so that stuck with me. And then when I thought, then the visitation was long and had many more things to it. But when I came back and thought about it, I thought about the ladies I work with in the bush, the ladies that no one will ever know them. But Jesus himself said that they are highly known in heaven.
Um,
So that was back in 2009. Actually, in October, it's going to be 10 years of that visitation. But that never left me. And so since then, my heart's desire is to be known in heaven, to work in the kingdom of God. It doesn't matter if I'm in the back bush of the bush of Africa. Doesn't matter if I am in the jungle in Brazil in a boat with 53 people, or preaching in a jungle where no one has ever been, as we did and Pastor Cher was there. It doesn't matter. To me, it's like as long as heaven knows my name, as long as I'm doing what I am called to do. Because preacher girl, you may be called to be a mom, and you may be known in heaven by the greatest mom on earth you could ever be. You may be called to be an amazing entrepreneur and be the most amazing one that this earth would ever know. If you do God's purpose, if you fulfill God's purpose in your life, you will be known in heaven. And that's my goal. Doesn't matter. I don't care about stages. I don't care about how many Facebook likes we get. As long as heaven knows me, as long, and one important thing, I don't just want to be known in heaven. I want to be known in hell. I want Satan to know my name. I want him to tremble when I walk into a place, because that's what we deal with here. We deal with witchcraft. We deal with doctors. We deal with demon possessed people. I want the demons know who I am. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter if people on earth doesn't know my name, if I have or don't have a Facebook page or a website, doesn't matter. That does not matter, because that will always stay behind. Will always stay. When we go, that will stay behind. I want my name to be known in heaven, and I want Satan to know my name and tremble when he hears the sound of my voice. So that's something I carry ever since I had that visitation.
Wow. Well, that this is a really good place to tell you, preacher girl. If you share this podcast today, I just felt like it's a really, I didn't even think about this before the podcast, but we're going to randomly choose one of you. And I'm going to send you a Missionary Celia package. So one of you is going to win it. It's going to, if you've seen me advertise the Kuka makeup bags that they make under the trees there, right there in Gambani, that supports Missionary Celia's project. I'm going to send you a set of those makeup bags, and the better part of this, I'm going to send you a video called Secret Sunflowers that is the story of Missionary Celia as recorded by Farflung Tin Can. It is a movie. It's going to bless you, and one of you lucky preacher girls are going to get it in your package along with your makeup bags for sharing this podcast on your Facebook page. Missionary Celia, it's been an immense journey. It's been almost 2 decades. Tell us what was the most exciting part of your day today. Before she tells you, I got to remind you, every day, Pastor Celia and her team feed hundreds of kids right there in their church building. These kids sit in there, and I say a church building and you're thinking cross steeple. No, none of that. It's just a building made of bricks, and the kids come from school, most of them barefoot, most of them with the only outfit they own, and they sit there, and Pastor Celia and the girls that she has hired, they cook, and the kids, the teenagers volunteer, and they feed hundreds of children every day. That's her life. That's what she has given up everything to go do. But tell us, it on a typical day, or tell us about today. What was your highlight today?
Oh my gosh. And you get one of the best
I
highlights.
know, I was so excited.
So our kids, the kids we work with, they're in the bush. Their toys are little rocks. Their toys are little wires. They don't have toys. They never had a toy. The girls never had a doll. The boys never had a car. You know, a car. They never had one. So somebody in Brazil donated some money specifically for me to get toys for our kids. 300 toys. And so today I was in South Africa to get those toys, and I picked up like uh, a car for each of the boys and a doll for each of the girls. And I am so excited. I'm so excited because I cannot wait. We're going to be delivering, we get handing them out next week, and I cannot wait to see those little faces. I cannot wait to see those faces getting those. So yes, it was a great highlight for me today.
Can you imagine? I am like in New York, and I'm thinking about how I could get there, to be
Yeah.
there, to see those faces. That is the joy of my life. To see the smile
Yeah.
on a child's face when they hold a doll or a truck for the first time. There is nothing in the world that compares to that. So feeding those kids was so amazing to me, and being there to give them food in their hands and watch them eat was amazing. But the look, you're going to have to record it. Sally,
I
you're
will do a
gonna have,
live. I will do
good.
a live.
You're gonna
It's
have
gonna
to
be
do a
Friday
live.
next week.
I can't wait to see what the little ones look like when they That's like my dream come true right there to watch that happen. But Sully does, I mean, the toys are such an immense deal for her, but every day she makes those children's day because for some of them that meal is the only meal they have. Sully, as we wind up this interview, I want you to just speak to the preacher girls out there that were probably thinking that God didn't call them, or that what they've been called to do is bigger than they are, or that they're not fully equipped, whatever it is that the spirit of the God is leading you to say to them. Why don't you just look at them right now and speak to them?
Preacher girl, I want to tell you what was said about David in the book of Acts, saying that when David fulfilled God's purpose for his life in his generation, he died. I'll repeat that. After David fulfilled God's purpose for his life in his generation, he died. God's purpose for your life may not be to come to Africa as a missionary. God's purpose for your life may not be to be on the stage and preach to big crowds. God's purpose for your life may not be to be a preacher girl who is speaking on a podcast. But whatever God's purpose for your life is, it is the greatest purpose anyone could ever have, because it is God's purpose. What legacy will you leave behind you? It doesn't matter if you are called to be a mom to one child, to 10 or 12, like Susanna Wesley, a woman that left behind her such a great, big impact. He was never a preacher. And yet John Wesley, if you have heard of his name, he said, I have learned more about God and theology from my mother than any of the theologic books that I have ever read. So God's purpose for your life, it is the greatest purpose you could ever have, because it is God's purpose for your life, whatever it is. So what I want to tell you is your yes to the Lord will allow him to fulfill his purpose in your life. And my prayer for you, each of you that's watching this, is may it be said about you what was said about David, that after you, preacher girl, fulfilled God's plans and purpose for your life, then you died. Not before that. You're not allowed to die before fulfilling God's plans and purpose for your life. So I bless you with that. And that's my prayer. When you watching this, that's my prayer. That it may be said about you what was said about David.
Wow, I receive that. I receive that
Amen.
in my own life. In the
Amen.
name of Jesus, I pronounce that
Amen.
and
Amen.
agree with Missionary Celia for every
Amen.
single one of you
Amen.
that are watching right now.
Amen.
I couldn't think of a better blessing. I couldn't think
Amen.
of anything better that God
Amen.
can give you from a podcast than that. And Celia, I just want to say I
Amen.
love you. I'm so honored to
Amen.
know you, to be a part of your life here on earth. And I know that when you get to heaven, you're going to be so overwhelmed that you're so famous there. You're going to be so famous there. And I'm going to be like, I know her. I know her. She's a preacher girl. She's my friend. Preacher girls, we love you so much. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Thank you for coming into our studio, for letting us come into your earbuds and watching us here on YouTube. Be sure to like it. Be sure to share it. And reach out to Pastor Sally. Reach out to her on Facebook and let her know that this podcast made such a difference in your life. Sally, we love you. God bless you.
I
And we're
love
all
you.
coming to Mozambique.
Amen.
Bye, Sally.
Bye.